The most dangerous people in your life aren't the ones who attack you openly. They smile, they stay close, they wait. Not everyone wants to see you win. Some people are only watching to learn where you are weak. And here's the truth most people miss. They can only harm you if you give them emotional access. Most people don't lose their peace because others are powerful. They lose it because they react, they explain, they expose. Stoicism was built for this exact reality, not to turn you cold, but to make you unshakable, not to harden your heart, but to discipline your mind. Today, you're going to learn how to become so internally disciplined that toxic people lose the ability to disturb you, manipulate you, or pull you off your path. No confrontation, no emotional exposure, just quiet strength. If this feels personal, it's because it is. Welcome to NexusMind. Let's begin. Master your emotions. Evil people don't need strength to harm you. They need access. Access to your reactions. Access to your emotions. Access to the moment you lose control. That's where their power lives. They don't attack you directly. They provoke. They poke. They wait for you to react. Because reaction is permission. Anger, frustration, defensiveness, fear. These are not just emotions. They are openings. The moment you react emotionally, you reveal something. You show where you're vulnerable. You show what can be pulled again. Stoicism begins here, not with silence, not with detachment, but with command. Because the person who controls their emotions controls the situation. Evil people feed on volatility. They need emotional movement, raised voices, rushed words, visible discomfort. When you stay calm, their strategy collapses. Your composure denies them fuel. Nothing unsettles malicious intent more than a person who refuses to be shaken. No argument, no explanation, no visible disturbance, just control. This is not weakness. This is dominance without noise. When you respond calmly while someone is trying to provoke chaos, you reverse the power dynamic. They expected anger. They got restraint. They expected collapse. They met structure. Your calm exposes their insecurity. Your restraint reveals their lack of control. And slowly, without confrontation, they lose interest. Because people who rely on emotional chaos cannot operate against emotional discipline. Stoicism teaches this clearly. You are not responsible for what others do, but you are fully responsible for how much access you give them. Self-control is not silence for politeness. It is silence for strategy. It is choosing not to reveal your internal state to someone who has not earned that privilege. When you master your emotions, you remove the handle they use to move you. And once that handle is gone, they cannot turn you, cannot pull you, cannot destabilize you. They are left confronting something they fear deeply, someone they cannot control. This is where strength begins. Not loud, not aggressive, but unshakable. Be unpredictable. Predictability is not stability, it is exposure. The moment people believe they understand you completely, they begin planning around you. They anticipate your reactions. They prepare their moves. They adjust their behavior to exploit your patterns. This is how manipulation works, not through force, but through familiarity. Evil people study consistency the way hunters study trails. They watch what sets you off. They notice when you explain yourself. They learn when you retreat and when you overextend. And once they know your rhythm, they don't need to attack you. They just wait for you to do what you always do. Stoicism disrupts this, not by turning you deceptive, but by turning you disciplined. Unpredictability does not mean chaos, it means restraint. It means you stop advertising your next move, you stop narrating your emotions, you stop signaling intention before action, you move quietly. Because silence creates uncertainty, and uncertainty removes leverage. When people don't know what you're thinking, they can't manipulate the outcome. When they can't predict your response, they can't set traps. This is why Stoics valued reserve, not secrecy born of fear, but discretion born of strength. You don't react the same way every time. You don't respond immediately. You don't explain your absence. You don't justify your progress. You let results arrive without announcement. This unsettles people who rely on control. They want consistency because consistency lets them plan. But when your behavior is grounded rather than reactive, they lose the ability to steer you. Unpredictability forces others to deal with reality instead of expectation. They can no longer provoke a guaranteed outcome. They can no longer press a known button. And slowly, they stop trying. Because manipulation fails when the pattern breaks. Stoicism teaches you to act from principle, not impulse, from intention, not habit. That alone makes you difficult to influence. You don't change who you are, you change who has access to knowing you. And once your moves are no longer visible, your progress becomes unstoppable, because people can only block paths they see coming. This is not hiding, this is protection, this is power without performance. And when you become unpredictable in this way, you are no longer a target. You are terrain no one knows how to cross. Detach from validation. The fastest way to lose control of your life is to hand it to other people's opinions. Approval feels harmless at first, a compliment, a nod, a sign that you're accepted. But over time, validation becomes a leash. Evil people understand this instinctively. They don't need to fight you. They just need to control how you feel about yourself. They give praise when you comply. They withdraw it when you don't. And slowly, without noticing, you start adjusting your behavior to stay in their good graces. That's how power shifts. Stoicism cuts this off at the root. Because the moment your worth depends on someone else's approval, you are no longer free. You hesitate. You second guess. You explain yourself too much. You shrink your truth to avoid rejection. Validation becomes a currency, and manipulators know how to spend it. Detachment changes everything, not detachment from people, but detachment from permission. You stop asking the world to confirm your value. You stop needing applause to feel solid. You begin sourcing certainty internally. This is deeply threatening to people who rely on your insecurity, because a person who knows their own worth cannot be steered by praise or destroyed by criticism. Compliments lose their grip. Insults lose their sting. You listen, but you don't absorb. You evaluate, but you don't collapse. Stoicism teaches that confidence is not loud assurance, it is quiet self-agreement. You know who you are before anyone speaks, and because of that, external opinions become information, not identity. This doesn't make you arrogant, it makes you grounded. You still learn, you still adjust, but you no longer betray yourself for acceptance. People notice this shift. Those who depended on your neediness grow uncomfortable, because when validation no longer controls you, neither do they. The noise fades, the pressure lifts, the manipulation ends, and what replaces it is something far more dangerous to toxic people: inner stability. A person who does not need approval cannot be played. If this chapter resonated, comment, "I govern myself." Build emotional distance. Emotional distance is one of the most misunderstood forms of strength. People confuse it with coldness, with arrogance, with withdrawal. But emotional distance is not about pushing people away. It is about deciding who gets close. Most people don't suffer because life is cruel. They suffer because they grant emotional access too easily to people who have not earned it and never intended to protect it. They mistake familiarity for safety. They mistake attention for loyalty. They mistake presence for care. And once someone has access to your emotions, they have leverage. Not always malicious leverage, but leverage nonetheless. They learn what excites you, what hurts you, what makes you anxious, what makes you doubt yourself. And even unintentionally, they begin shaping your inner world. Stoicism teaches a different approach. You do not build strength by closing your heart. You build strength by placing it behind discernment. Not everyone deserves to know your fears. Not everyone deserves to hear your plans. Not everyone deserves to influence your emotional state. Emotional distance begins with this decision. Access must be earned. This is not isolation, it is selectivity. You can be polite without being open. You can be warm without being vulnerable. You can be generous without being available. Toxic people depend on emotional closeness. They need reactions. They need reassurance. They need visibility into your inner life. Because once they understand your emotional patterns, they know how to disturb you. They know when to provoke, when to withdraw, when to guilt you, when to pressure you. Distance dismantles this. When you stop over-explaining, people lose ammunition. When you stop reacting immediately, people lose rhythm. When you stop sharing everything you feel, people lose insight. This is why emotional distance feels uncomfortable at first. You're breaking patterns that others benefited from. You're no longer emotionally predictable. You're no longer feeding every dynamic. You're no longer bleeding internally for external validation. And some people will resist that. They will accuse you of changing, of being distant, of being different. That's often the signal you're doing it right, because people who thrived on your emotional availability feel threatened when it disappears. Emotional distance creates space, space to think, space to observe, space to choose your response. You stop reacting from emotion and start responding from judgment. You become less entangled, less drained, more centered, and in that space, something critical happens. Your peace stabilizes. You no longer absorb every mood in the room. You no longer internalize every opinion. You no longer feel responsible for fixing what isn't yours. Stoicism does not ask you to become indifferent. It asks you to become sovereign, to govern where your energy flows, to protect your inner stability, to recognize that emotional exposure is a resource, and resources must be guarded. When you build emotional distance correctly, you don't become harder. You become clearer. Clear about what deserves your attention. Clear about who deserves your vulnerability. Clear about when to engage and when to step back. And once that clarity is established, toxic people lose their foothold. They can no longer provoke reactions. They can no longer drain energy. They can no longer reach inside you, because the gate is closed, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. This is emotional distance, not isolation, not indifference, self-command. Respond with silence, not defense. Defense feels natural. When someone attacks your character, spreads lies, or tries to provoke you, your instinct is to explain, to correct, to defend. But defense is exactly what gives them power. The moment you rush to justify yourself, you elevate their actions. You signal that their words reached you, that they disturbed your inner balance. Stoicism teaches a counterintuitive truth. Not every attack deserves a response. Some people don't want truth. They want reaction. They want to see you flinch. They want to pull you into chaos. They want to feel significant by disrupting your peace. Silence dismantles this strategy, because silence denies them feedback. It refuses to validate the provocation. It starves the behavior of attention. This is not avoidance, it is control. When you defend yourself emotionally, you are still fighting on their terms. When you remain silent, you shift the terrain. Your silence becomes a mirror. It reflects their insecurity back to them. It forces them to sit alone with their intention. And most people cannot tolerate that. Stoicism never taught passivity, it taught restraint. There is a difference. Restraint is choosing not to engage because engagement would cost you clarity. You don't explain your truth to people committed to misunderstanding you. You don't argue with those who gain power from conflict. You let their words fall without giving them weight. This kind of silence is uncomfortable for others, because without your reaction, they lose momentum. They escalate. They repeat themselves. They reveal more than they intended. And in doing so, they expose themselves. Your silence keeps you composed while their behavior becomes visible. This is why silence is strategic. It conserves energy. It protects dignity. It maintains position. You are not running away. You are standing above. Stoicism teaches that reputation is not defended through words, but through consistent action. Truth does not need volume. Character does not need explanation. When you stop defending yourself impulsively, you stop handing out authority over your emotions. You choose when to speak. You choose when action is required. You choose when silence is more powerful than words. And when you do speak, it carries weight, because it is rare, measured, intentional. Silence is not weakness. It is patience sharpened into power. And once people realize they cannot provoke you into reaction, they lose the ability to harm you. Stay rooted in purpose. People who lack direction are easy to disturb. A comment can ruin their day. A setback can derail their momentum. A single opinion can shake their confidence. This is not because they are weak, but because they are unanchored. Without purpose, the mind drifts, and whatever drifts can be steered by others. Stoicism understood this danger clearly. Purpose is not motivation, it is orientation. It tells you where you are going even when you don't feel strong, even when emotions fluctuate, even when life becomes hostile. Toxic people rely on uncertainty. They rely on you questioning yourself. They rely on you reacting instead of advancing. But when you are rooted in purpose, their behavior becomes background noise. You stop engaging emotionally with distractions that don't move you forward. Because purpose filters attention. It asks one stabilizing question before every response. Does this serve my path? If it doesn't, you let it pass. This discipline protects your energy. You no longer feel obligated to explain yourself, to defend your choices, to correct every misunderstanding. Your direction speaks for you. Purpose turns emotional triggers into irrelevant data. When someone tries to provoke you, you don't ask how to win the interaction. You ask whether the interaction matters at all. And most of the time, it doesn't. This is how manipulation loses its grip. People who depend on reaction cannot influence someone who is focused on destination. Purpose also transforms pain. Setbacks stop feeling personal. They become adjustments. Betrayal becomes clarity. Rejection becomes alignment. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this training me for?" This shift is subtle, but it changes everything. Because once pain has direction, it loses its power to derail you. Stoicism teaches that life is not organized around comfort. It is organized around growth. Purpose gives pain meaning, and meaning turns endurance into strength. When you are deeply aligned with purpose, your emotions stabilize, not because nothing hurts, but because hurt no longer controls movement. You continue forward even when conditions are difficult. This is deeply unsettling to people who want control. They expect collapse, they expect reaction, they expect explanation. Instead, they encounter momentum, quiet, steady progress that does not stop to argue. Purpose does this. It removes you from the emotional economy to which toxic people are addicted. You are no longer a participant in unnecessary conflict. You become unavailable to manipulation. And once your life is oriented around purpose, you realize something powerful. You don't need to defeat toxic people. You simply outgrow them. They remain where they are, while you move forward. That is the quiet strength Stoicism was designed to build. Forgive, but never forget. Forgiveness is one of the most misunderstood strengths in life. Most people confuse it with weakness. Others confuse it with reconciliation. Stoicism does neither. Forgiveness is not reopening a door. It is closing the wound without reopening the gate. When you forgive, you are not declaring someone innocent. You are declaring yourself done carrying the poison. Because resentment is a form of attachment, it keeps you emotionally tied to the very person who disrupted your peace. Stoics understood this deeply. They did not forgive to be virtuous in appearance. They forgave to regain inner sovereignty. But here is the discipline most people lack. You forgive emotionally while you remember logically. That separation is everything. Toxic people depend on emotional amnesia. They rely on time dulling your memory, on guilt softening your boundaries, on your empathy overriding your discernment. They return differently spoken but not differently structured. Same patterns, same entitlement, same hunger for access. Stoicism teaches you to watch behavior, not words. Because words are cheap, patterns are expensive. Anyone can apologize. Few people actually change, and wisdom is knowing the difference. Forgiveness frees your nervous system. It lowers the emotional charge. It returns your sleep. It gives you clarity again. But memory protects your future. Memory is not bitterness. It is data. It tells you who violated boundaries, who twisted truth, who drained energy, who felt entitled to your emotional labor. When someone shows you who they are under pressure, believe that version, not the version that appears when they need you back. Stoicism does not require hatred to stay alert. It requires attention. You stop dramatizing the past. You stop reliving the hurt. But you also stop rewriting history to feel safe. That is maturity. You don't warn them. You don't explain yourself. You don't announce closure. You simply move differently. Access is reduced. Conversations become shorter. Emotional availability narrows, not from anger, from accuracy. Forgiveness allows you to move forward light. Memory ensures you don't move backward blind. This is how cycles end, because toxic people only win when you forgive and forget. They lose power when you forgive and remember. That balance makes you unshakable. No hatred to manipulate, no guilt to exploit, no emotional hooks left to pull. You become calm, not because you are naive, but because you are aware. And awareness is the highest form of protection. You don't need revenge. You don't need closure. You don't need their understanding. You need peace. And peace requires discernment, not denial. Forgiveness clears your heart. Memory guards your life. Together, they form quiet strength, the kind that doesn't announce itself but never gets wounded the same way twice. If this chapter spoke to you, comment, "I forgive, but I remember." Final closing arc. By now you should understand something clearly. Strength is not loud, protection is not aggression, and power does not announce itself. The most dangerous person in any room is not the one who speaks the most, reacts the fastest, or demands attention. It is the one who cannot be moved. You've learned how toxic people operate. Through reaction, through emotional access, through predictability, through your need to explain yourself. And more importantly, you've learned how their influence ends, not through confrontation, not through revenge, not through trying to be understood, but through discipline. When you master your emotions, they lose leverage. When you control the frame, they lose narrative power. When your mind becomes a fortress, they lose access. When you detach from what you cannot command, they lose their grip. When you turn pain into strength, they lose their advantage. When silence becomes your response, they lose significance. And when you forgive without forgetting, they lose the ability to return. This is not about becoming cold. It's about becoming clear. Clear about who gets access to you. Clear about what deserves your energy. Clear about what no longer gets a reaction. Because the truth is simple. Toxic people only have power over those who are emotionally available to manipulation. And you are no longer that person. You don't need to announce your boundaries. You don't need to justify your distance. You don't need to explain your growth. Your calm will speak for you. Your consistency will protect you. Your silence will confuse those who once depended on your reactions. This is what it means to be unshakable, not untouched by difficulty, but untouched by control. Carry this discipline forward, not just when you're tested, but before the test ever arrives. Because the strongest shield is the one already in place before the strike. This is NexusMind, where calm becomes power, where silence becomes strength, and where self-mastery ends the cycle for good. If this path resonates, stay. The work continues.